What's good, word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. So after hiring a 33rd team for our GM slash head coach search and hiring former GM Rick Spielman to consult and assist or collaborate with the 33rd team on this, we already have a pool of candidates that we need to know, and I would expect as part of the initial wave of interviews conducted for the GM search specifically for the Jets, and these are some high profile names, ones that I haven't even covered yet, right? Many of the GMs we've broken down have been guys that are expecting to interview for the first time, or maybe they've had a few run-ins and nothing consistent, but this list is pretty strong, and this is based a lot of what Rick Spielman did last year with the Commanders before they hired Adam Peters. Rick Spielman collaborated with Bob Myers and a couple others, from my understanding, in order to get that done. And the turnaround was extremely quick, right? It took them 4 days from start to finish to complete that. So considering that the Jets are getting a humongous head start in terms of starting to investigate, gather background knowledge, and really do their due diligence prior to bringing these guys in, I would expect that this is probably a pretty quick process as well. Hopefully a seamless transition, right? Let's get into some of the names here, though. To start off, according to what I dug up, Ian Cunningham, the Bears' assistant general manager, was supposedly the runner-up if Adam Peters didn't end up getting the job ahead of him. Now, the Athletics run a survey from NFL agents, and I love some of these, right? I think they also conduct stuff like the player evaluations for coaching staff, stadium, etc., etc. There were two specific call-outs here. One, and by the way, don't let it fall on deaf ears that this survey is via NFL agents, which is a huge core piece of what general managers are going to be working with. So knowing what the 411 there is on how they're perceived from a industry perspective, huge. Two call outs. One, great talent evaluator, and two, and most importantly, young evaluators and thinkers to build up his staff. Now, one of the pieces that I love the most about that specific call out is that, one, that means not only is he recognized for the work that he's able to do, he clearly has strong enough connections to where people can already pick out multiple multiple personnel across his staff that they feel confident in is doing an impressive job there, right? So I love that. Now, there's some stuff in his history I don't necessarily love. There's also some kinks there that may give Woody Johnson some pause, right? For one, similar experience to Joe Douglas in terms of coming up, where he's been acclimated to in terms of front office work, and even the fact that he worked directly under Joe Douglas with the Eagles as an assistant director of player personnel, but came up via the Ravens, went to the Eagles, and then was the GM for the Bears. So this will actually be his second go around if he can officially get the job. And I would have pause here, not only from Woody Johnson's perspective, but from my concerns. The job that he did in 2022 wasn't particularly great, right? You look at a lot of the problems with the roster construction and things for the Bears, and whether you want to place that emphasis on coaching staff or the players they acquired, obviously a deeper conversation, but at least something to consider and put away. But clearly he's on the up and up. The fact that this is his second go around in terms of hopefully getting a GM position, and that he was on Rick Spielman's radar to begin with, makes me think that the general consensus is he wasn't the problem. It was a situation he couldn't overcome. With that said, clearly the Jets will fall in a very similar bucket, so it makes you think, can he get the job done and be the guy to make it work finally? Who knows? But let's get into the second name here. Glenn Cook, the Browns assistant general manager, one of the quickest rising stars from my understanding. He's under 40 years old for one, which is extremely young, especially for a potential GM candidate. He interviewed with teams like the Commanders, the Titans, the Vikings, and the Bears previously. He's interesting if you are on the basis of we can still make this thing work with Aaron Rodgers. He was a former scout for the Packers, and he actually drafted Davante Adams directly. So not only is he extremely intimate with Aaron Rodgers, he has specific knowledge about Davante Adams and could hopefully figure out a way to make those two work in the event that we do decide to keep them. Rodgers doesn't want to retire, etc., right? So the whole game plan, if you're hiring a guy like Glenn Cook outside of whatever other accolades you want to throw in, is the perception that they're going to try to run it back healthier with AR and finally see if they can make this thing click in a magical 1-year run. But otherwise, outside of that, there wouldn't be a ton of exciting things there for me specifically, but I haven't dived a ton into his past. Just high level wise thinking is not a hire I would love to see, just because I do want the fresh slate and being removed from Aaron Rodgers and just all the mess that's there, right? One of the one of the ironic moments is that Aaron Rodgers called out the New York Jets in general, right? Multiple facets of it, but the New York Jets in general need to cut out a lot of the issues causing drama, and yet he is a direct source for a lot of that stuff, whether intentional or not. It's just the allure of AR. So nonetheless, not my favorite candidate on this list so far, but let's get into the third name here. Alec Halaby, the Eagles assistant general manager. He's probably the most intriguing, also probably one of the most scary options, because he is fully into the money ball approach, right? If you want to think about what the Browns did when they went out and, signed Deshaun Watson and gave him a huge extension and made all of these crazy flurry of moves when it came to guys that you felt like you could build a team around, or guys that nobody really had on the radar that they were signing to contracts. This is a huge analytics guy. The scary piece of this is, personally, I work in analytics pretty heavy, and so not to say that these guys don't know how to do their job or anything, but there is a ton of things that can go wrong, false positives in data, not organizing or prepping the data correctly, or having quote-unquote clean data. And if you're just looking, talent evaluators hate stat sheet watchers, right? Stat sheets do not give the full or clear picture of what a player is, what they could be, or what possibly the issues may be. And yet, people that lean too heavily into data analytics, that's exactly what could kind of happen. Now, I think where you see some positives on that in the back end is situations like the situational awareness managers, or whatever they're called in the NFL, where they want to figure out if you want to go for it on third or fourth down, right? If you want to, run out some clock, just general situation awareness and what the best probability says to do, right? And then, of course, I think about things like in the draft, where you're looking at a prototype based on successful schemes and players that we've seen already operate in the NFL. And you have situations like the Legion of Boom, for example, and the prototype that they made famous at cornerback with the long limbs, 6 foot plus, etc. You could really hone in on some of that stuff. And I'm thinking more so like UDFA class signings and day 3 picks, where you're not expecting a whole ton right out of the gate, but finding a guy that has all of the measurables, right? Your 10 RAS score type guys could potentially become a huge dividend payout for you if you make that work. But again, not one of my favorites. One of the things I will say is, in addition to that, it's not like he's necessarily cut his teeth as an evaluator or anything else. With him leaning so heavily into analytics, he has had the opportunity to hold roles as a player evaluator and on the cap side of things. And that was under the, directive of Howie Roseman. He's essentially his disciple here. But still, it's cause for concern. I don't think sports is a environment that lends itself particularly well to data analytics when you want to use that as the forefront of making some critical decisions here. The fourth name here, Will McClay, the Cowboys VP of Player Personnel. This one probably intrigues me the most so far out of these names, right? So he's a former Cowboy scout, also a former Arena Football League player, simultaneously held roles as a top executive for the Cowboys, and then head coach for the Arena Football League of the Dallas Desperados. So needless to say, obviously a guy that can multitask at a high level, right? Head coach and executive being, some pretty consuming work, and he was able to make those things happen. He's generally considered the top guy in Dallas that's not named Jerry Jones. So I love the fact that you're looking at a guy that could make critical decisions. He's aware, Dallas being another high pressure environment, maybe on par, maybe excelling what you see in New York, for example. Jerry Jones obviously takes a lot of the heat there, rightfully so, kind of a Woody Johnson type. So you feel like a guy like McClay here would be pretty in tune with what to expect and how to manage a guy like Woody Johnson potentially. And Woody Johnson, in my opinion, is actually probably less intrusive than a guy like Jerry Jones, since he clearly holds all of the top roles. So a guy that walking through the door, I feel like, would have a chip on his shoulder, would have a certain allure or energy, or young kids like to say aura about himself, that would give him not only immediate credibility, but also would maybe give Woody Johnson some ease. And especially with him expected to be overseas in London or somewhere, hopefully, it'll be even less situations where he probably has to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. Now, he's been a loyalist since he's been contracted to the Cowboys. So from what I dug up, he's declined multiple interviews over multiple years. And that's something I really love as well. This isn't a guy that's just looking to jump ship at the best opportunity. He wants to establish himself and let it be known that he's the best of the best where he's at. The interesting piece to this and why he could potentially be a strong fit for the Jets is that his contract is actually ending this year. And to date, from what I dug up and what I've seen from one of the reports in X Factor I saw for this, his extension status isn't unknown. It's not like these are the kind of guys that it's national, news when it is broken. So who knows? If we get a decline or acceptance, though, I think that'll be pretty telling over whether he did get one or not, or if he just doesn't envy the Jets situation. To be determined, but so far, Will McClay would be the name that I probably have at the top of this specific list so far. And then finally, the fifth name here, Brandon Sosna. He's the Commanders' Senior Vice President of Football Operations. He was part of the mass hiring, right? The complete rebuild that was done with the Commanders, but he's very intriguing as well, because not only is he considered one of the fastest rising executives in the NFL, when you look at the Jets, and a lot of people talk about what they want, us being the fans, players, anybody just generally within the team environment, everybody will tell you we have to figure out a way to effectively end the curse, right? And what that means or boils down to is a culture changer. And this guy is clearly labeled that. He has been a part of two major turnarounds. The first one as the Senior Director of Football Administration for the Detroit Lions. And he came in right around the time they started having the vast turnaround, double-digit wins, getting to the playoffs, breaking all of those records that, and things you don't want to see with them not having success for over 50 years, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously love that background. And then, of course, he's had one of the craziest turnarounds here with the Commanders as their SVP of football operations. So yes, short order, 2 years with the Lions, obviously just 1 year here with the Commanders, but I don't know, chalk it up to luck, chalk it up to whatever you want to. It's hard to see that level, that dramatic of a turnaround in two different organizations and not feel really, really excited about what that can mean if he came here to New York. Now, he's also a bit of an oddball because he falls into that Don Aponte type that I discussed previously, where he's more of an administrative guru and a guy that knows how to make sure things are operating at optimal levels. And I feel like that is something that we strongly need, right? So again, maybe there's going to be some lapses in ability to talent evaluate, et cetera, but looking at what he did with the Commanders, looking at what he did with the Lions, either he's going to have a very trusted team around him or he's better than many people expect. Also, a hidden bonus here is based on his connections already. You would imagine that if you can hire Brandon, you also get the inside scoop on guys like O.C. Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, DC, both from the Lions, and Cliff Kingsbury from the Commanders to potentially be head coach options for the New York Jets and what could be a potentially volatile position for us. Suddenly a lot better with the presence of Brandon there. So I'd be all for it. Let me know what you guys ultimately think, though. Again, fully expect all of these guys to be at least in the initial wave of interviews. And with all of these guys already being essentially, I want to say railroaded, the previously researched by Spielman. These make very easy decisions for him when it comes to just collaborating and figuring out if it checks off the boxes that what he's looking for or not. But let me know what you guys think. I'll get you again. Peace.